The African Deep Dive podcast is brought to you by the African Technology Policy Studies Network. This podcast explores how science, technology, and innovation can drive sustainable development and global inclusion in Africa.
It's really ambitious, isn't it? The way Sub-Saharan African countries are stepping up on climate change, putting forward their NDCs, under the Paris Agreement. But you do wonder with these big plans.
Oh, you track it.
Yeah. How do we actually know if progress is being made? It's like setting off without a map, almost.
That's exactly the challenge. Setting goals is one thing, a vital thing. But measuring how you're doing, that's where the real work comes in.
Which brings us nicely to this specific project, quite a mouthful. Building the capacity of selected sub-Saharan African countries to effectively measure progress in their nationally determined contributions implementation using tracking tools and indexes project.
It rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it?
Right.
But yeah, despite the name, what it's actually doing is incredibly important.
For accountability, for knowing what's working.
Exactly. And so in this deep dive, we're going to look at the work done through this initiative. It's led by ATPS, the African Technology Policy Studies Network, and their partners, PACJA and WAGEDI.
Right, and they've got funding behind them from the African Development Bank through the African Climate Change Fund, specifically for this measurement challenge.
Yeah, the ACCF.
Yeah.
And the scope is pretty wide. We're talking 12 countries.
Botswana, Cote d'Ivoire, Ethiopia, Ghana, Kenya, Namibia, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. That's a lot of ground to cover.
It is. And the core goal, really, is to get these countries the right tools, the indexes they need.
So they can get a clear picture, an accurate one.
Precisely, of how their NDC implementation is actually going. It's about moving past just making promises, to seeing real action and understanding the impact.
And this isn't starting completely cold, is it? I think you mentioned it builds on stuff they've done before.
Yeah, that's a key point. This initiative builds on previous collaborations, existing networks. ATPS and its partners, they've worked in this space before.
Developed monitoring tools elsewhere.
Exactly. In 8 other sub-Saharan African countries previously. Yeah. So the knowledge they've gained, the relationships built, it provides a really solid base.
Okay, so the ultimate goal isn't just for, say, Kenya to see how it's doing in isolation.
No, not just that. It's also about enabling them to compare their performance, see how they stack up within Africa.
Which could really spur things on, couldn't it? Shared learning, maybe a bit of friendly competition?
That's definitely part of it. Being able to benchmark against your peers. It can highlight what's working well, what strategies could be adapted elsewhere. It fosters that continent-wide push.
Okay, let's dig into that. The ATPS analysis really focuses on why getting stakeholders involved matters so much. Why is it so crucial for actually implementing these NDCs in sub-Saharan Africa?
Right. This is like fundamental. Research across all these countries, Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda, Ghana, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Botswana, Zambia, consistently shows climate action needs a united front.
Governments can't just do it alone.
Not effectively, no. Let's take Kenya. The research there really highlights making sure climate goals line up with national development priorities.
So it can't just be some separate green target over here.
Exactly. If it's not woven into the economic and social goals, it can get sidelined. So bringing everyone in, government agencies, private sector, civil society, local communities, helps ensure that alignment, helps address Kenya's specific challenges too.
And Kenya seems to be doing well with focusing institutions like the CCD you mentioned.
Yes, the Climate Change Directorate. Having a dedicated, empowered body like that really acts as a focal point, ensuring that coherence we talked about. It's a catalyst.
Okay, and Ethiopia, what's the key stakeholder insight there?
Well, in Ethiopia, there's this growing realization, particularly in the private sector, about the potential for, green investments, sustainable business.
So engaging them is about unlocking that potential.
Pretty much. Using things like public-private partnerships, getting international support, it's all seen as vital for tapping into that and hitting their NDC targets, creating the right environment for green business.
Uganda's situation seems to highlight a very practical issue, just getting the resources and capacity together.
Absolutely. Yeah. Countries like Uganda often face, real financial, and tech constraints. So broad stakeholder participation becomes essential just to pool resources, share knowledge, build skills.
Drawing on everyone's expertise.
Right. And making sure climate actions really fit with their national development goals is critical there too.
Ghana's experience seems to emphasize making sure policies are inclusive.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Effective engagement there means the policies actually reflect the needs of everyone. Government, civil society, businesses, communities. That fosters ownership, commitment. You need that for things to work long term.
And Nigeria. The rationale there mentioned trust and transparency. That sounds foundational.
It really is.
Yeah.
Bringing diverse stakeholders in Nigeria, it helps get wider perspectives, different expertise, helps mobilize resources. But critically, it also builds transparency, accountability, and ultimately public trust in the whole process.
Which you absolutely need for something this big. Sierra Leone brings in local knowledge. That seems vital too.
Hugely important. Involving a wide range of actors there ensures climate actions are relevant, fair, and actually benefit from the insights of local communities. Grounded solutions.
And Botswana, with its specific challenges like drought, collaboration seems non-negotiable there.
Indeed. Botswana faces very particular climate vulnerabilities. Tackling those effectively really demands everyone working together, integrating different viewpoints to make sure initiatives are effective and relevant for them.
Right. And Zambia echoes that theme of needing tailored, sustainable solutions.
Yeah, broad participation in Zambia helps ensure diverse perspectives. That crucial local knowledge gets baked into climate solutions from the start. It fosters ownership, makes solutions more likely to fit their needs, and therefore last.
So the big picture is bringing everyone to the table isn't just, a nice to have. It's fundamental.
Absolutely fundamental for effective climate action in these contexts. There's a lot to unpack.
There is a lot to unpack, and we'll pick up right there in the next part of our deep dive.
You're listening to the African Deep Dive podcast. We would love to hear from you. Share your thoughts, suggestions, and comments via social media or email. Thank you for tuning in and stay with us for more insightful conversations.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit. How did ATPS actually figure all this out? What research methods did they use?
They used a pretty robust mix, actually. For the analyses in Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda, Ghana, Nigeria, Botswana, and Zambia, they combined primary and secondary data collection, trying to get a really comprehensive view.
Okay, so secondary data. That means looking at existing stuff. What kind of materials?
Right. They did thorough desk studies, reviewed all sorts of publicly available documents, the NDCs themselves, obviously, national climate policies, strategies, reports from different projects.
Academic papers, too.
Yeah, academic literature, but also gray literature reports, discussion papers on both mitigation and adaptation efforts, casting a wide net.
And then primary data, getting new information directly.
Yep. They use surveys, some quantitative with structured questions for broader data, some qualitative with open-ended questions for more nuanced insights.
From different stakeholders.
Exactly. And crucially, they did key informant interviews, KIIs, talking to people identified as having really deep knowledge on the ground in each country.
And I think you mentioned focus groups, too, to kind of cross-check things.
Precisely. Focus group discussions, FGDs, were vital. They brought together people from all sides, government, private sector, civil society, researchers, media, development partners.
A real mix.
Yeah, to validate the data they'd gathered from the desk studies and KIIs and to triangulate it. Make sure the picture was accurate, capture different perspectives on the issues. It's about making sure the findings are solid.
Sounds very thorough, multi-layered. Okay, let's dive into what they found. The major findings, best practices, real-world impacts. Let's start with Kenya. It sounds like they've made some impressive progress.
Kenya really has shown remarkable progress, a strong commitment to tackling climate change and fostering sustainable development. A lot of that comes down to some really effective strategies and best practices they've adopted.
Okay, like what? What are these best practices driving Kenya forward?
Well, one key thing has been strengthening their climate institutions, particularly the Climate Change Directorate, the CCD, within the Ministry of Environment.
Having that central coordinating body.
Exactly. It helps ensure policies across different areas are coherent, aligned with climate goals. It acts as a hub.
And money. Finance is always a big factor. How's Kenya done there?
Climate finance mobilization has been huge for them. They've been really proactive, seeking and securing funding through bilateral deals, multilateral channels, international climate funds.
So getting the resources in.
Yeah, and that influx has been crucial for supporting a whole range of climate projects.
Technology and innovation seem important in Kenya's story, too.
Absolutely. Kenya's really embraced tech transfer, innovation, especially in renewables, geothermal, wind, solar, often through partnerships with the private sector.
Creating a dynamic, clean energy sector.
Right. And they've also used tech advances in things like agriculture and water management to boost climate resilience overall.
And what about the tangible results, the actual impacts on the ground?
Well, the growth of their renewable energy sector is a big one. You can see that. But beyond that, enhanced community resilience, especially for vulnerable groups, biodiversity efforts, new green jobs created.
And international recognition, too.
Yeah, they're getting noticed globally for their ambitious climate action.
Okay, let's move to Ethiopia. What were some of the standout findings there?
Ethiopia has some really interesting programs, like their Productive Safety Net program, the PSMP. It cleverly integrates climate-smart stuff like soil and water conservation directly into its work.
Helping people and the environment.
Exactly. Benefiting millions while tackling environmental issues. And their Sustainable Land Management Program, the SLMP.
That's focused on land rehabilitation.
Yes, launched back in 2008. It's been very successful in restoring millions of hectares of degraded land, often using community-based approaches. Shows the power of local involvement.
And engaging local communities in forestry, too.
Through participatory forest management, or PFM.
Yeah.
This helps conserve forests, but also gives real economic benefits back to local people managing those lands.
Smart. And like Kenya, Ethiopia is also focused on finance.
Yes, establishing the Climate Resilient Green Economy CRGE facility has been absolutely key. It's a mechanism for mobilizing significant climate finance to support adaptation and mitigation across their economy.
Okay, turning to Uganda, what's their story with NDC implementation?
Uganda's shown real commitment to its NDC targets. They're actually seen as a bit of a regional leader in climate action.
What kind of policies have helped them?
They've developed key ones, like the National Climate Change Policy, the National Adaptation Plan. These lay out their main strategies for building resilience across all sectors.
And it sounds like different groups are working together quite well in Uganda.
Yeah, the whole national climate change institutional landscape there involves strong collaboration. Governmental bodies, non-governmental ones, all working towards the country's NDC goals. It's quite a coordinated effort.
Right. Let's head over to West Africa now, Ghana. What were some of their notable best practices?
Ghana's COVID-19 recovery program, the CARES program, actually has an interesting climate angle. It aims to build a more robust economy that's also moving towards being resilient and low carbon.
Building back better, basically.
Sort of, yeah. And they've also established good practices for managing climate finance, setting up specific financial mechanisms to make sure funds are used effectively for low-carbon development.
And practical solutions on the ground, like agriculture and energy.
Absolutely. They're actively implementing climate-resilient farming practices, rolling out renewables like solar and wind, especially for agriculture and rural development.
And strengthening institutions. We heard that was important elsewhere.
Ghana's definitely focused on that. Establishing cross-ministry coordinating committees, boosting the institutions directly responsible for climate change, developing clear policies, and crucially, capacity building for officials. Training them up.
Okay, Nigeria now. What's been driving their progress?
Nigeria's progress seems driven by putting in place a solid policy framework and key institutional mechanisms, providing that structure.
Any specific program examples?
Yeah, the Climate Change Adaptation and Resilience Building Program, CCARBP, from 2019. It directly supports their NDC adaptation goals. Things like promoting climate-smart agriculture across a large chunk of farmland.
And is there a specific agency enforcing environmental rules?
Yes, NESRIA, the National Environmental Standards and Regulations Enforcement Agency. They have the mandate to enforce standards, including emissions-related ones. That enforcement piece is key for NDC implementation.
The overall setup in Nigeria sounds quite complex institutionally.
It is quite comprehensive. The Federal Ministry of Environment is the main hub, with the Department of Climate Change overseeing things. Then you have the National Council on Climate Change for policy guidance, a trust fund for finance, National Adaptation Plan, multiple layers.
And like others, they're linking climate goals to broader development.
Exactly. Integrating climate into national development frameworks and really emphasizing multi-stakeholder engagement are key parts of Nigeria's approach.
Okay, maybe just touch briefly on some others. Sierra Leone, what stood out there?
In Sierra Leone, community-based adaptation projects using local knowledge seem really effective. Also, private sector innovations, promoting sustainable practices, and the media playing a big role in raising public awareness.
Botswana sounds like they've really tried to weave climate action into government operations.
Yeah, big strides in mainstreaming climate action into things like their National Development Plan 11, their National Climate Change Policy, and they highlighted good practices in agriculture and water management, too.
And finally, Zambia. What were the highlights?
Zambia's got interesting renewable energy projects, like solar mini-grids. They're promoting climate-resilient agriculture, important forest conservation work, like the Integrated Forest Landscape Project, and they're actively mobilizing finance through the GCF and their own National Climate Change Fund.
It's fascinating to see the variety, but also the successes across these countries. But we also need to talk about the flip side and the challenges. What were the common hurdles ATPS found?
Yeah, several key challenges definitely came up repeatedly. A big one for many is just limited financial resources. That was noted in Kenya, Uganda, Ghana, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Botswana, Zambia, Zimbabwe, pretty much across the board.
The cost of transition and adaptation is huge.
It really is.
Yeah.
Then there are policy issues. Things like fragmentation, lack of consistency came up in Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda. Different policies not always joined up.
Climate not fully integrated into sector plans.
Right. And policy coordination gaps were specifically mentioned for Ethiopia.
Data and information seem to be another common problem.
That's right. Limited data systems for making good decisions. That was flagged in Ethiopia, Ghana, Nigeria, Sierra Leone. Issues with data quality, availability, sharing.
Makes it hard to track progress accurately.
Exactly. And then there's institutional capacity.
Not having enough skilled people or clear roles.
Yeah, capacity limits within institutions were a concern in Ethiopia, Uganda, Ghana, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Botswana. Shortages of specialized skills, sometimes unclear roles, weaknesses in data collection bodies. It all adds up.
What about governance and inclusivity issues?
In Ethiopia, they mentioned power dynamics and inclusivity issues, making sure groups like women and youth can meaningfully participate. And a lack of overall governance cohesion was noted as a challenge in Zambia.
The reliance on fossil fuels must be a barrier, too.
For sure. Kenya and Uganda specifically highlighted that continued dependence as a major hurdle for meeting their emissions reduction targets.
And legal frameworks. Sometimes they don't quite support the goals.
Well, Nigeria pointed out a lack of binding legal commitments for monitoring and evaluation sometimes. And in Zambia, the fact that their MRV system, the monitoring, reporting, verification framework, isn't fully operational yet.
Those MRV systems are crucial for transparency, right?
Absolutely. They're how countries track and report their actions accountably.
And finally, public awareness. Still room for improvement there.
Yes. Low public awareness was flagged as a challenge in Sierra Leone and Zimbabwe. That can hinder broad public support and engagement, which you really need. And Zimbabwe also mentioned inadequate climate-resilient infrastructure and lack of expertise.
It's definitely a tough road. But the analysis didn't just focus on problems, right? It also highlighted opportunities, ways to enhance NDC implementation.
Yes, absolutely. Several promising opportunities came through strongly. One big one is enhancing climate finance strategies, exploring things like green bonds, public-private partnerships.
Finding new ways to fund this work.
Exactly. That was highlighted for Kenya, Ethiopia, Ghana, Nigeria, Botswana, Zambia, and Zimbabwe.
And investing in people capacity building and knowledge sharing.
Crucial. Investing in targeted training for people in government institutions. That's vital pretty much everywhere. Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda, Ghana, Nigeria, Botswana, Zambia, Zimbabwe. Plus, sharing knowledge effectively, getting sustained support from international partners.
Making sure climate isn't an add-on, but integrated into all planning.
Yes. Fully mainstreaming climate considerations into all development planning stages was emphasized for Kenya and Botswana. Getting that harmonized approach.
And leveraging technology and innovation.
Definitely. Embracing tech innovation for better data, more renewables, sustainable agriculture. That was a key opportunity noted for Ethiopia. And promoting green tech and renewables was seen as a pathway for Zimbabwe and Nigeria too.
What about public awareness and getting everyone involved? Still opportunities there.
For sure. Boosting public awareness campaigns specifically mentioned for Kenya, fostering social inclusion, engaging marginalized groups, highlighted for Sierra Leone and Ethiopia, and creating a better environment for private sector investment in climate solutions key for Botswana and Sierra Leone.
And international collaboration remains vital.
Absolutely. Collaboration, sharing knowledge, sustained support from development partners, crucial opportunities for Uganda and Ethiopia. That includes finance, capacity building, tech transfer.
Finally, strengthening the underlying systems, legal frameworks, data, MRV.
Yes. Improving data management and sharing, having robust legal frameworks for climate action, better policy coherence opportunities for Ghana and Nigeria. Fully operationalizing those MRV systems is key for Zambia, and recognizing and using indigenous knowledge an important opportunity highlighted for Ethiopia. Also, sustainable resource management for Zimbabwe.
It's good to see that alongside the challenges, there's a clear view of the potential ways forward. So pulling it all together, what were the main policy recommendations from ATPS drawing across all these countries?
Several key themes emerged. One was definitely establishing dedicated national climate finance facilities and exploring those innovative mechanisms, green bonds, PPPs, to get the needed resources flowing.
And investing in people kept coming up.
Yes, implementing comprehensive capacity building programs, targeting government officials, technical staff, even local communities. That was a very consistent recommendation.
Better coordination across government was another one.
Strengthening policy coordination and coherence across different sectors, different levels of government, making sure everyone's pulling in the same direction. And improving climate data management and sharing systems was also a recurring point.
Ensuring fairness and inclusion seemed important too.
Very much so. Fostering inclusive governance structures, actively promoting gender equality and social inclusion in climate policies, and enhancing the legal frameworks to better support mitigation and adaptation efforts.
And finally, specific actions like pushing renewables and managing resources.
Right, introducing incentives and policies to speed up renewable energy adoption, and the crucial step of increasing resource mobilization and making sure those resources are managed effectively for targeted climate actions.
This has been, well, incredibly insightful, a real deep dive into the vital work ATPS and its partners are doing. It hammers home that stakeholder participation isn't optional, is it? It's fundamental.
Absolutely.
We've looked at the serious challenges these countries face, but also the inspiring best practices and real impacts they're achieving. And those recommendations offer a solid roadmap.
Yeah, the ATPS analysis really illuminates the complexities, the nuances of NDC implementation in Africa, but it also highlights those common threads, the need for collaboration, and the absolute necessity of being able to measure progress accurately, for accountability, and to drive more action.
So as you, our listener, reflect on this, maybe think about this, how could the lessons we've discussed, the recommendations highlighted here, apply elsewhere? Maybe to other global climate initiatives or even local sustainability efforts in your own community? Consider that core idea we kept coming back to, the crucial role of real collaboration and the need for good measurement in achieving any ambitious goal, whether it's global or right in your backyard.
Well said. And for anyone interested in exploring this further, the Technopolicy Briefs series from the African Technology Policy Studies Network offers much more detail, including those country-specific analyses that informed our chat today. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
Thank you for listening. Join us every Thursday for more insightful conversations.